All right, thanks a lot for the introduction. And like you said, we're going to talk about why Microsoft 365 admins need to understand Azure as well. There's a lot of overlaps there. So we're going to dive into that for the next 50 minutes or so. Again, my name is Ben Stegink, Chief Cloud Consultant. I'll dive into a little bit, give myself a little bit more background about myself here in a minute. But first, we are going to go over a couple of housekeeping items here. So I'm going to jump. I'll make my slides a little bit bigger here for you. Oh, in theory. There we go. Now we have the slides bigger. So first of all, this is we have the next version of this, or the SharePoint Conference 2021, that is now the Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference. So make sure to put this on your calendars, follow the hashtags, and oh, my slides went crazy on me. Make sure you get that on your calendars, register for that. That conference is coming up. Hopefully it will all be able to be back live in person. Hopefully we'll get through everything going on and be able to be together again in person coming up in March of next year. Also, a big thank you to all the sponsors. All of these events couldn't happen without sponsors, so go check out the sponsors, give them a shout out, give them a thank you for helping to put on this event, help support some of the costs that go into producing things like this. And then we do have a giveaway too. So if you want to go win some fun stuff, go visit the vendor booths, the session, watch the videos that those vendors have, and then submit your answers to enter the raffle. So you do have to go in and watch these videos. And I think in all the videos, there is going to be, my slides keep trying to auto advance on me. There is a different Olympic item in them. So as you go fill out the survey, you need to fill out at least 5. For each vendor, go put the item that was in their video, whether it's running shoes or a baton or various items from Olympic events. Those are all going to be there. So go check out the sponsors, their videos, go enter the raffle, win the Oculus. Win the Oculus. And then finally, we do have the charity. So 10% of all of the money from the sponsors is going to charities. If you want to go donate as well, obviously this time is a unique time, a time we have never experienced before. So go check out, go donate if you want to. And a big thank you again to the sponsors, to the organizers for helping to support these different charities. So now that we're through that, a little bit about myself. If you don't know who I am, if you haven't seen me before, and as well, as you have questions as we go through the session, feel free to put them in the live Q&A. I'll keep an eye on that. I'll try to leave some time to answer this. Does the Oculus support Office 365? SharePoint Spaces, I think, would support the Oculus with the 3D environment in SharePoint Online. So in a way, yes, Oculus does support 365. But a little bit about me. Again, I'm Ben Stegink. I live down in Jacksonville, Florida. You can see a URL here to my blog, benstegink.com. I try to get out, blog there every once in a while. I'm also a Microsoft Cloud Consultant, Chief Cloud Consultant, Microsoft 365 guy, whatever I decide I want my title to be any given day. I have my own company, intelligink.com. I have been doing SharePoint Office 365 for a long time. The company is just me. Interesting thing about me, I have 4 kids. They're all 7 and under, and it's getting close to their nap time. So if you hear some noise in the background, my kids are 7, 5, 3, and 1. You very well may hear some screaming or some crying or something during the session, but they're running around outside my office door. Again, I've been doing SharePoint for about 14 years now. Office 365 since before it was Office 365, back when it was primarily BPOS. And my focus is Office 365, Microsoft 365 administration, SharePoint administration. I don't do development. I try to avoid the code and just focus on those administrative topics. I also have a podcast, the Microsoft Cloud IT Pro podcast, where you can imagine we talk all about the Microsoft Cloud, Azure, Microsoft 365. Myself and a friend of mine, Scott Hogue, do this together. Weekly episodes. Go search for the Microsoft Cloud IT Pro podcast. Go check out our website. We should be pretty easy to find. And then finally, I do have a link here if you want to go grab some additional resources. There is the links to the slide deck in there. There is some links to some YouTube videos that I have out there that are similar to this. A document that goes along with one of those YouTube videos. There's 5 or 6 different links that you'll get emailed. If you go check out that website, throw in your name, email address, you should get an email even while we're going today with some of those additional resources related to this session. So as we go through today, kind of an overview of where is that overlap of Microsoft 365 and why do administrators that are managing Office 365, Microsoft 365, I have a tendency to use those interchangeably because frankly, the naming convention and Microsoft's naming of those also kind of flip-flops back and forth. I'm going to try to stick to Microsoft 365 because some of this does include some of those additional features that come with Microsoft 365, primarily EMS or the Enterprise and Mobility Suite. But as I jump back and forth, I'll try to stay consistent and just stick with Microsoft 365, but I may fall back to Office 365 just out of habit. So you kind of have 3 areas when it comes to Microsoft 365 in Azure. The first of those is the core functionality. Much like a car, you have your seats, you have your steering wheel, you have your doors, you have your windows. There are certain core aspects of Microsoft 365 that overlap with and involve Azure. If you've seen some of the other sessions already today, you may have seen some of that core functionality and where some of that overlap is. So that's going to be the first area we're going to look at as we look at why you as a Microsoft 365 admin also need to be aware of Azure and some of the Azure administration. The next one we're going to take a look at is security. There are certain components of security that come with that core functionality in Azure, but there's also some things you can do in Azure to enhance your security, to make your security better and really increase how your Microsoft 365 environment is secured by taking advantage of some of the functionality, that exists in Azure. And then the final area we're going to look at is some enhancements. What are some of those Azure services that you as a Microsoft 365 administrator could take advantage of or leverage when it comes to Microsoft 365? There's probably 2 or 3 key features in Azure that I actually use a lot as a Microsoft 365 administrator to really help enhance my Microsoft 365 environment or add some additional functionality to it. So first, that core functionality. What do I get from Azure on day one that I may not realize? Some of this may seem basic, but you would be surprised how many people I talk to that I get surprised by some of these. The first thing every Office 365 tenant has, or every Microsoft 365 tenant has, is Azure Active Directory. I was actually on a phone call with a MSP a couple of days ago, and they said, I have a new client that's looking to roll out Microsoft 365. I'd like some help. But do you think we should roll out Azure AD since they're starting brand new with Microsoft 365 as a part of it? And I was actually speechless. Like, it caught me off guard for a minute. And sometimes I forget that some of those things that I don't even think about anymore, people don't realize that. every Microsoft 365 tenant has Azure AD under the covers. There's a couple different ways you can get to it, and we can even take a look at some of this in the demo. Is you can go to AAD for Azure Active Directory.portal.azure.com and get right to Azure Active Directory. The other way you can do it is you can actually just go to portal.azure.com. The Azure portal, log right into the Azure portal, search for Azure Active Directory, and it comes up. Azure Active Directory is central to Microsoft 365, and that's where all your identity is provided, all your users are, all your licensing. Some of that stuff that you see in the Microsoft 365 admin portal, your admin.microsoft.com, is just getting pulled straight from Azure Active Directory and just being surfaced in your Microsoft 365 admin portal. And you may not even realize, again, that it's driven by Azure Active Directory behind the scenes. You also do have some additional Azure AD features that are available with Azure AD Premium, Plan 1 and Plan 2, when it comes to things like conditional access that we'll look at in a little bit, some of the Intune, some of the app management policies. There's a lot of additional features that are available with Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1 and Plan 2 that you get, that you can take that environment further with, that are already there, they're baked in, they're under the covers. And then again, multi-factor authentication. This is one of those services that if you don't have it turned on, you definitely should go turn this on today in your Microsoft 365 environment. This is included by default in Azure Active Directory. And there's a lot of management you can do of your multi-factor authentication, all within Azure Active Directory. There's ways to kind of get down to some of it through the Office 365 admin portal. But if you really want to manage multi-factor authentication effectively, you really need to go into Azure Active Directory and look at MFA there. From a data protection standpoint, Azure Information Protection, or Microsoft 365, or Microsoft Information Protection, or Microsoft 365 and the Compliance Center Information Protection. Information protection, when it comes to protecting your data, protecting your files, all within Microsoft 365, is another one of those areas that you have an overlap between Microsoft 365 and between Azure. Like you see on the slide, you can go into your Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, you can go look at information protection, and you have all your sensitivity labels there. You can go create sensitivity labels, create policies around those sensitivity labels to help protect financial information, PII information, various types of information that you have stored within your tenant. This is going to be there right out of the gate. It's bundled right in Microsoft 365. However, you also have Azure Information Protection that has the same type of thing. It also has labels, it has policies that you can apply. And when you go and look at that in Azure, there's actually now a unified labels section in your Azure Information Protection that allows you to take your labels that you've created in Azure Information Protection, or take your labels that you've created in Microsoft 365 Information Protection, and sync those together. So those labels, you have a unified set of labels, both in your Azure Information Protection as well as in your Microsoft 365 Protection. And both of these labels cover different types of things. When you start talking about Azure Information Protection, there's certain things that you still need the Azure Information Protection client for in order to be able to do. There's other functionality that you get right within the Office apps when you're using Microsoft 365 Information Protection. So, well, I would say Microsoft 365, the information protection in there, where now you can assign those labels and take advantage of those labels right within your Office apps, within SharePoint, within Outlook. So understanding how those two, this premium plan licensing, I will get to that question in a minute. So you can create labels in either place, and you may even have different people creating labels in different places and not realizing where labels are coming from. So having that awareness that you could have unified labels enabled, have labels syncing, have different policies created in different places is really something you need to be aware of. And once you do turn that unified labels on, you can't go back. So that's another thing to be aware of. If your Azure admin is in there and they're looking at information protection and rolling that out, and all of a sudden they go turn on unified labels, you may have a whole bunch of labels just randomly show up in your Microsoft 365 environment. That could be where those are coming from. And then you may also hear Microsoft information protection thrown around. Unlike both your Azure information protection and your Microsoft 365 Compliance Center information protection, this isn't a product you can buy, but it's a framework of products. It's all of these different information protection bundles or products all kind of bundled into one that help you protect that sensitive information across your entire organization. So Microsoft information protection includes Azure information protection, Office 365 information protection, things like 365 DLP, Windows information protection, and then Microsoft Cloud App Security. So when you hear Microsoft information protection, they're kind of all, it's all of those products bundled into one. And then finally, you have data access controls. This is an interesting one that I'm going to show you guys here in a minute. We'll do a quick demo, and I have to keep track of time too because I have a tendency to go long. Data access controls, like on the slide, actually allow you to control data within SharePoint and Exchange. And how this works is kind of interesting in that you may not necessarily realize what Office 365 is doing under the covers when it comes to some of these data access controls. What these do is they allow you to do things like from an unmanaged device, a device that isn't joined to my Azure Active Directory, a device that isn't compliant with my policies, a device that I don't recognize. You can set it so you can't actually download any information from SharePoint. You can work with all your documents, all your files, all of your content within SharePoint, but you can't download it. And then when that ties over to Exchange, it doesn't allow you to actually download attachments out of Exchange Online to a computer. It will allow you to save them to your OneDrive or to save them somewhere else in Office 365, but it really makes sure all of that data stays within your Office 365 environment. As far as premium plan licensing impacts to these protection capabilities, absolutely. So things like this data access control, conditional access, some of the different feature sets of information protection are impacted by that licensing. For instance, all the conditional access, data access controls, you do need that enterprise mobility and security licensing, or one of the Azure AD premium plans. I can't remember which one. There's a great link if you want to go out and compare this. Remember o365sd.com. That will take you to the service descriptions of the entire Office 365 product suite, where you can actually do feature by feature comparisons. Jason, as far as those unified labels go, it is, I'm going to jump into a demo while I answer that question in a minute. As far as those labels go and the applying them to all XLSX files or data in SharePoint library, that's actually something you can set at the policy level when you set up those different labels. So if you do want to have those labels applied to certain features, certain libraries, you do have that ability within the policies. It's not, I don't think it's quite as granular as doing it at the SharePoint library level from the policy, but there are also information rights protection settings you can set in the SharePoint library. I don't think you can set a label by default. Usually those labels are up to clients or up to your users, or you can set it up so that like all files are categorized a certain way by default. So some of this built-in Azure AD stuff, I'm going to show you how those conditional access policies work and the data access controls, just because that's an interesting one. And if I try to show you all of these demos, frankly, I'm going to run out of time. So one of those options you have is if I go into my SharePoint Admin Center, and I'm going to go over to -admin.sharepoint.com. And there's a few different things that actually work like this when it comes to Office 365 and SharePoint and what's going on here. If you go over to your admin center and you look at these policies and these access controls, if my browser doesn't freeze on me, there we go, access controls, you can see I can go in now to my unmanaged devices, and by default, you're going to have full access from desktops, allow limited web-only access, block access. I'm also going to show you, I am over here in Azure Active Directory for the same tenant, for my Navuba tenant, and I can go down to security here, and within my security, I can look at conditional access. I have some baseline policies here. Just ignore these for now. They're going to get deleted in a few months anyways, or whenever Microsoft decides to delete them. If I go over here to my unmanaged devices and set this to allow limited web-only access and hit save, it appears like it's just making that change in SharePoint. It doesn't really say what's going on. It does say that you have those conditional access policies here. Go to Azure AD Admin Center to look at them. If I jump back over here to my Azure AD Admin Center and I refresh my conditional access policies, you will actually see I get 2 new conditional access policies here that have SharePoint in it. It gives the date they were created. Once it refreshes here, come on, there we go. So here's my SharePoint conditional access policies that were actually created by just clicking those buttons in the SharePoint Admin Center. And if I go and look at these, it's just creating a normal conditional access policy that you could go in and create this exact same thing from scratch. And when you go in and look at your grant controls, this is where it's requiring those devices to be compliant, to be Azure AD joined. And this one didn't actually work. So what it should be doing is actually turning on these use app enforced restrictions. Oh no, this was blocking access. I clicked on the wrong one there. Sorry. It's the other policy that actually goes and sets the app enforced restrictions. That one was set up to block, and then the other one is set up to allow those app enforced restrictions on the environment. So Azure, as a Microsoft 365 admin, again, go to aad.portal.azure.com, go dig through Azure Active Directory. You'll see a lot of those settings here. This is where you can manage your enterprise applications that also can tie into SharePoint. They can tie into Exchange, some of those add-ins you've added. You can go manage your users, your licensing. This takes everything that you can do in the Office 365 admin portal from the perspective of managing your users and brings that and a whole lot more into place in terms of really being able to manage your identity, the security of your environment, and looking into a lot more details than what you might actually get in just admin.microsoft.com. So let's jump back to our slides. And so additional security. How can Azure actually help improve the security of my Microsoft 365 environment, provide some of that additional reporting capabilities? What are some of those options that I do have available within my environment? So conditional access, this is the one we just looked at. Not only do you have those data access controls, but you can go set up conditional access so people can only access Office 365 from a certain country or from a certain IP address, or enforce multi-factor authentication in certain environments. If you have risky sign-ins, if you have users that have risky behavior, you can go in through these conditional access policies and really lock down how people can access your environment, where they can access your environment from, what types of devices they can access your environment from, even what apps they can use to access your environment. Another one of these, and some of these admin centers, people would argue, well, the securitycenter.windows.com isn't really Azure. And while some of these admin centers that I'm going to show here aren't necessarily admin centers, they also don't actually show up anywhere in the Office 365 admin center. So one of these is your securitycenter.windows.com. Within this, it kind of unifies Advanced Threat Protection. It can now be unified with Microsoft Threat Protection. You may start noticing a lot of these Microsoft are kind of bringing names together. It's kind of all turning into Microsoft 365. Again, Microsoft Threat Protection, now the Advanced Threat Protection. This gives you that ability to really take your security to the next level. And I'm going to try to have some time. We can jump into that security center and I can show you that. But within that security center, you have things like advanced hunting, where you can go create reports off of user activity, what users are doing with an exchange, where they're signing in from, how they're signing in. It pulls some of that information from your unified audit log all into the security center, but it also brings in data from Cloud App Security. It brings in some of your device information. If you've deployed the Microsoft Defender to your Windows 10 machines, and you can pull that data into your security center. You can look at different device information in your security center. So it really helps consolidate the security of your entire Microsoft 365 environment by pulling information in about everything into a central hub, into a central site where you can really look at your security, bring that security to the next level. And then Cloud App Security. This is another one of those that you're not going to see this anywhere in your Microsoft 365 Admin Center. But if you go to yourtenant.portal.cloudappsecurity.com, I believe this one is an E5 license. But this actually ties back into what we just looked at, the Advanced Threat Protection, the Security Center. It allows you to pull in the audit logs, look through a lot of the audit logs. This also allows you to look at activity that's going on with third-party products in your environment. And I just found a new feature that they added to Conditional Access the other day, where if you're using Windows 10 and you have your Microsoft Defender deployed, you can set up conditional access policies. So in certain conditions, it actually uses your Cloud App Security Center as a proxy for the activity. And you can look at information about what other apps are people using. Are other people in your environment or in your organization using Dropbox or Google Drive, even though all your files are supposed to go into SharePoint or OneDrive? Are they downloading files or are they just uploading files? If they're downloading them, maybe it's external people sharing with them. But if they're uploading files to Dropbox, maybe that shouldn't be happening. And there's even policies that you can set in Cloud App Security taking advantage of that proxy where you can start setting sensitivity labels on files that are going out to third-party services, setting up alerts for yourself based on what is going on within your environment, what files are uploading. So taking advantage of Cloud App Security, if you can get some of those E5 licenses, really are going to help you even get a better handle on things your users may be doing that aren't up to your certain compliance standards. Some of my clients are in regulated industries and they're like, we absolutely cannot have people using Dropbox. Something like this is perfect for them. They can go in on a regular basis or set up alerts to see what those users are doing and if users are using Dropbox. There was a question there from Lorraine. Can PSTs be exported from AAD like the e-discovery function in Security Portal? Not from Azure AD. E-discovery, when it comes to exporting PSTs, is really the only way to get to those PSTs that I'm aware of. It definitely wouldn't be in Azure AD. I'm trying to think if there's a way in the Exchange Admin Center to get to it. But not, yeah, not that I'm aware of in Azure AD. So another thing that comes into play from that advanced security perspective in Azure is securing your devices or securing your data. Within Intune, you have the mobile device management, but you also have app protection policies where you can manage the application and the data within the application, not the device itself. If you guys haven't ever played with these, you really should go look at these app protection policies. What this does is instead of taking over an employee's whole device, especially if you're in like a BYOD scenario where they're bringing their own devices, they may not be comfortable with, you may not even need to take over their whole device where you can do things like block what they can do with the camera or block where they can back up their phone too. But you just need to make sure that your corporate data stays secure on their device. These app protection policies allow you to manage OneDrive for Business, Exchange, the SharePoint app, all of the different apps, most of them Microsoft, but even some third-party apps that have built this functionality into their applications, where you can do things like a remote wipe of your corporate data in the app. OneDrive is a perfect example, or Outlook on the mobile device, where they have their personal email, they have the business email. They have their personal files in OneDrive, they have their business files in OneDrive for Business. You want to make sure that those OneDrive for Business files stay in OneDrive for Business, that if the employee leaves, you can remove access to that. By rolling out these app protection policies from within Azure AD, you can, or not Azure AD, from within Azure and some of those security settings in Azure, you can put those policies in place that gives you that ability to wipe that data. It gives you the ability to say they can copy and paste from Outlook, but they can only copy and paste into another application that I manage. So they're not going to copy and paste their text out of an email, put it in a text message, and shoot it off to one of their friends, because the app protection policies will create that layer of security around the application itself without actually taking over complete control of their data. And you can go in, pick and choose which apps you want to manage. This is also how you can say, my employees are only allowed to use Outlook. I'm not going to let them pull their email into the Mail app on iOS or the Mail app on Android. Or maybe we're going to let them use other third parties, but we're only if we can protect them with these app protection policies. So app protection policies are another feature in Azure. You can figure it within Azure. You can get to it from within Azure AD, or you can just go up to your Azure services, look for app protection, and dive into it that way. Microsoft Endpoint Manager is another one where you do have that ability to go in and manage the entire device. This is another one that's not really in the Office 365 Admin Center. It's not really in Azure. No subscription when viewing. Yeah, Jason, I'm pretty sure that's at least an E5 license. when you're working with Office 365. Okay, I'll try to make my demo content bigger when I do it next time, when I jump back into another demo. And if you are looking to manage that entire device, whether it be Windows 10 or mobile devices, there's the device management portal, devicemanagement.microsoft.com, that really gives you that ability to go into the endpoint, manage policies on the endpoint, what they can do with Microsoft Defender. I was working with this the other day on a Mac. They do have Microsoft Defender for Mac OS, and you can go in and actually set policies where you're not able to turn off Microsoft Defender on the Mac. You can manage policies on your Windows 10 devices. You can take a lot of that functionality that you used to only have in an Active Directory server, and Microsoft is slowly bringing that to the cloud in terms of the ability to roll out different policies for device configuration, for app configuration, for all of the device management capabilities that you're used to in an on-prem world. Reporting and monitoring is another one. Azure Sentinel, Log Analytics. There were some other sessions earlier that I saw about Azure Sentinel and Log Analytics as well. These two are very tightly tied together in terms of you need to have Log Analytics in order to use Azure Sentinel. Azure Sentinel is that cloud security, information, and event management. This allows you to build a lot of different reports, set up different alerts, run different queries against your unified audit log, because you can set up your Office 365 or Microsoft 365 unified audit log to pump all of that data into Log Analytics, and then use Azure Sentinel to go in and query it. If you've ever used the search and the unified audit log, it works okay, but it's not great. Azure Sentinel takes that whole ability of looking at the unified audit log and really brings it to the next level, takes it to the next level in terms of what you can do and the type of data you can pull out of it. So I'm going to jump over to another demo. Let me see if I can make my screen bigger a minute and not mess up the screen sharing too much. Scaled. 720. Let's get that out of the way. Let's do this. Oh, I'm going to jump to my video a minute, and I'm going to jump back to my screen. And it did not like me doing that. So that happens when you do stuff on the fly, right? It gets all kind of janky on me. Can you go ahead and just switch from my video to my screen? And that should fix everything that just went wonky with my screen sharing. And hopefully get that demo bigger for everybody, because it looks like it is not behaving right now in terms of that screen resolution.
Shall I do that change for you?
Yeah, just make that change for me. That's fine. Okay. That'll be perfect. And then we'll be able to see these demos. So, sorry, I need to go in and share my screen a minute. Oh no, I should be sharing my screen. Let me go make sure, share screen. Sorry guys. share this screen. Okay. I think we should be good now. If you can share that screen, and we'll keep going. So Azure Sentinel Workspaces, hopefully everybody can see the screen better now. Or is that still, can someone just pop a message in the Q&A if, OAC said if you repick your screen in the shot. Thanks, AC. Let me try to do that a minute. Screen capture, add. It still is not liking that. Sorry, guys. I forgot to do this ahead of time. Monitor. Select that. Okay, I think I may have fixed it on my side. Possibly. Okay, sorry. There we go. Now you can see the demo. So this is what Azure Sentinel looks like. All right, it should be better now, AC, I think. Let me know. Where you can go in and really look at some of this information. So this is that high-level Azure Sentinel overview where you can dive in. You can see I have 7,600 events in Azure Sentinel recently, and it has some of those. You can go in, look at the logs, where it's going to show you some example queries. And trust me, Azure does not like 720p. Let's go into my hunting and hopefully avoid some of these pop-ups. Where you can have different queries in here, permutations on login events, multiple password resets by user. I did a mailbox login activity where it'll let you run queries then against your login activity. Go view those results. And it did not find any because it didn't pass that query through. But up here, there it goes. There goes the query. Now we'll run that query. You can go construct these queries in Azure Sentinel. Let's bump this up to 7 days. And go through and look at all of that different information right within Azure Sentinel. All those details about mailbox logins, who it was, where they logged in from, the user type, the username, the client, timestamp. So this will help you pull in all of that unified audit log information from your Office 365 environment right into Azure Sentinel. Go build some of those queries out. Again, set alerts on it. Do a lot of different things when it comes to querying your data and looking at your data in Office 365. So let's jump back in these last 5 minutes or so and talk about some of the enhancements that you can do when it comes to Office 365. So what can I use in Azure that actually integrates with Microsoft 365 to further enhance that platform and make my Office 365 environment better? One of the first is Azure Automation and Azure Functions. Azure Automation for the purpose of this presentation, because inevitably somebody is going to say it does a whole lot more than this, is PowerShell in the cloud. This lets me go in, run PowerShell scripts. It's free for the first 500 minutes that the PowerShell is actually running. It's not how many minutes this has been active, but actual time that PowerShell is running and being used in your environment. A runbook is essentially a PowerShell script. You can go out to the PowerShell gallery, install different runbooks, install different modules. Your SharePoint PnP module, your SharePoint Online module, your Teams module, your Power Apps module. Any of those modules that are available in the PowerShell gallery, you can add them to the Azure Automation service, write a PowerShell script, and go out and run any of that PowerShell. In addition to that, you can call Azure Automation from Logic Apps or from Flow, Power Automate now, from your Flow in Power Automate, to run that PowerShell as a part of your workflow. I've used this all the time for doing different things around provisioning, whether it is provisioning SharePoint sites or Teams or Office 365 groups. I've even used it for creating users, setting up licenses for users, any one of those things. Azure Functions, you can do the same type of thing. Azure Functions does tend to be a little bit more developer-y. You can do PowerShell in it. In terms of the integration with Power Automate with Logic Apps, it's not quite as smooth for me. I tend to go towards Azure Automation. I know other people that prefer Azure Functions and use Azure Functions for all of it. Another thing is Power Automate and Azure Logic Apps. So Power Automate tends to be owned by the creator. If you've ever gone in and created a flow in Power Automate, you're the only owner of that flow. Unless you add somebody else to it, it remains your flow. Logic Apps are owned by the Azure subscription. They sit in Azure. They tend to be a little bit better from more of a corporate management perspective. They do have a little bit more of a developer feel sometimes. For me, it's not bad. If I can do a flow, I can do a Logic app. They have some of the versioning, they have code edits. You can export it out of Logic Apps as JSON, store it in a content repo. The other big advantage that I've found recently is Logic Apps don't have the idea of premium connectors. They work with all of your Azure services like Azure Automation versus Microsoft Flow that it now is a premium connector to connect to Azure Automation. You are priced based on actions and executions rather than it coming with a quota in Office 365, but you're not paying for that premium connector. So some of those more corporate workflows, ones that maybe are owned by the whole organization, they may be better off done in Logic Apps. Another thing, you can always start in Flow, take a flow, export it, import it into Logic Apps, and move it from Power Automate into Logic Apps.
Hey, Ben, and the time is out.
Yep. So that was everything. Sorry we didn't get to that last demo of looking at some of that stuff and for the small demos there. But thank you for joining us. There's some speaker feedback, event feedback. Give everybody, presenters, we like the feedback, knowing what we can do better. The organizers like what they can do better. Again, there's my email address, Twitter, if you want to reach out on Twitter. There's that link again to go get some of these other resources if you do want to get that email of resources. So thanks again. Glad you guys all joined us. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. I think there's 6 hours left or so. And reach out if you have any questions or have anything else. So